hello and welcome to the This Awesome Life podcast. My name is Brandon and I'm your host, and guess what? I have an awesome life, but that's not that special because so do you. Having an awesome life is just about living with a purpose, and that purpose comes from God. When we discover that purpose, we can move forward in a way that brings us joy and energy. In every episode of this podcast, we talk about those stories, the stories that help us find a little bit more about who we are and who God has called us to be. In this episode, I'm going to sit down with my friend Corinne Noble, or as some people know her, KidMinCorinne. Corinne's got a great story of how God led her not only to her purpose, but then through it and into some interesting moments where she had to decide who she was going to be and how she was going to live that out. I'm not going to spoil her story for you. I'm going to let her tell it. So let's dive in, explore some stories, and celebrate this awesome life. Well, hello. Like I said, I am here with my friend Corinne Noble. Super excited to jump into her story. I'm not going to spoil it for you. Corinne, why don't you introduce yourself a little bit and tell us what you got going on these days?
Yeah, so I am Corinne, and some people know me as KidMinCorinne now. And I've been KidMin. Well, we'll talk about that later, right? But I do a lot of things. I am really freelance ministry at this point. I was a kids pastor for about 8 years full time, and then I moved more into like the freelance ministry world. And I've done all kinds of stuff. I mean, I started with like a blog, and I started doing curriculum. So I still do curriculum. I have started doing some coaching now, some consulting. I do some speaking. I really just do a little bit of everything as long as it's kids ministry. So I love to do really anything that just supports other kids ministry leaders and also ministers to kids.
That's awesome. So you were in kids ministry and then kind of shifted into doing your own thing. What was that transition like? Like what led you to that decision?
Yeah. You know, it was really wild for a while. I was married for a while without kids, so that made it so much easier for me to like work a lot. For those of you who work a lot in ministry, you know what I'm talking about. I mean, I was working like 80 hours a week at some of the churches that I was working at, but I didn't have kids yet, so I really could do that. And I was working at church full time, and then I started doing the blogging, and I started writing curriculum, and that was all a God thing. Like I didn't really see myself as a writer, like. I blogged, but I'm like writing curriculum. Like, no, I'm never going to do this. And then God was like, actually, yes, you are going to do that. God loves to like tell us we're going to do things that we said we would never do. Just look out for that. But one summer I was actually writing a curriculum to go along with my lead pastor who was doing a sermon series. And he wanted like the kids ministry to like be on the same page. Mm-hmm. And so I wrote it and, you know, we did, and it was really good. I was like, wow, that was actually really good. And like, I feel like I actually did a pretty good job of writing that. And then that was when God like dropped that bomb on me. He was like, actually, you're going to continue writing until I tell you to stop. And I have been writing ever since. It's been like, oh my goodness, 7 years now, maybe since I started. So that transition was crazy. And then I kept working at the church while doing the curriculum writing and the blogging and some speaking on the side and stuff. And I mean, I was still working full time at the church. Then I had my first kid and COVID happened like right after that. So it was like God just really gave me a really natural transition because we went, you know, to the work from home and everyone's church is closed down. And I still worked for a few months that way. And then kind of toward the end of the summer, I really started to feel that release from the full-time ministry position and God just giving me that open door to just do freelance. So that was huge for me as a mom, you know, with little kids at home. And now I have 2 little kids at home. So I'm able to do that freelance ministry thing and not be full-time in a church. So it's a huge blessing for me to be able to be a mom, work when I can, and then still be able to be in ministry and do ministry.
That's awesome. Man, what a story. It's, you know, there's a lot of people that in that COVID season kind of reframed a little bit. Who am I going to be? What do I want to do? What do I want my legacy to be coming out of this? It was kind of like a blank slate moment for everybody. How did you kind of walk through that season? Was there ever any doubt of like, oh man, maybe this is the COVID talking?
You know, honestly, I feel like I'd been like, there was something in my spirit that really wanted to move on from the church position that I was in for a while. but I also had that like check in my spirit that it just wasn't time. It wasn't time. Like, it didn't feel that peace. I didn't feel the release. And then through that time at home, I felt like, I mean, it's hard to explain, right? Unless you're like that person, but I could just feel like the peace was coming and that it was right. And that it was just the right time. So obviously I prayed about it for a few months, talked with my husband about it. Then I met with my lead pastor and talked with him about it. And we made that transition like very smooth. You know, I was like, I'll stay for a few months. I'll help you, you know, find someone else. Like, I wasn't just dropping the ball on him. I wanted it to be, you know, a good transition because I'd been at the church for about 5 years. So, you know, I wanted to see it succeed and move on to the next person. So it was a good transition. And I feel like when I got that piece, I didn't second guess it.
I hear that. I think for a lot of us, work from home was like the best thing ever. And for many others, it was the worst thing ever. And so it was this kind of confirmation moment for all of us of like, okay, I cannot do this, or I really want to do this. And it is
complicated. Like,
yeah,
it is. No, it's totally complicated. I mean, my office is like wide open and my kids are around sometimes. It's a little messy sometimes.
Yeah.
But it's also, like I said, it's a huge blessing. It's the way you look at it, you know. Yeah, in some ways, like, we're all here and we're all trying to work around each other, but we're also all here. So, you know, make the most of it, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I found out during that time, I'm like, I'm definitely a not work from home person, but my wife's been working from home for years. And she just now recently started working at our church a little bit, like 1 or 2 days a week. And so she's like, oh, it's really cool to be around people again. But then at the same time, like at the end of that day, she's like, all right, yeah, I'm ready to go home. So she's kind of that unique, like hybrid model.
I feel like I did enjoy working in an office, and I work well. I work well both places. I feel like, I mean, I was homeschooled most of my life, like as a kid and a teenager. So I work really well at home because that's, you know, that's how I did most of my schooling. So I'm a self-starter. I homeschooled myself. My mom went to work. She was a single mom. She went to work during the day. I was homeschooling myself. So I'm used to like keeping myself accountable and working on my own from home. So it's like, it's natural for me.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess I am quite the opposite. I took one self-paced online class in college and I didn't do any of it. So that was hard. But then when I went back later in my later years, I did online school and I was just fine. You know, but seasons, right? But anyway, hey, it's funny that you said like, you know, you said I'll never do this. And then you started doing it, you know, like, and that has been a running theme in several of the episodes prior of people saying like, oh, I'm never gonna. I remember we had one of my favorite episodes. We had a mom on there who was homeschooling both of her kids. And that was her line in the sand because she tried it and she hated it. And she's like, I will never do this again. And then she felt this like urge in her spirit to like homeschool her kids. And she's asked her husband if she was crazy. And he's like, I don't know, you might be, but we should probably do this. And now she loves it. And she writes books about homeschooling, you know? And so what was that like when you wrote that first curriculum series and you thought, okay, this is pretty good. And God's like, yeah, you're going to keep doing it. Was that like oh, no, that was a one-off deal. I did it because I had to. Or were you like, okay, fine? Or what was your response, I guess, to that?
I feel like I was like pretty freaked out. I'm like, oh man, like I know this is God because it's something I said I wouldn't do. And I feel like that's one of the reasons why God does that, you know, because he's like, okay, if you said you weren't going to do this, like when I tell you to do it, you're going to know it's not you. Because like, why would you say you want to do this?
Yeah, that's a good point.
So it was like, at the same point as like, I did know it was God, but I also was like, but God, for real, like, no, I don't want to do this. Like, it's too much. And it was a lot. Like when I was doing like the full-time kids ministry job and I was trying to write this curriculum, like really full-time. I mean, I was really doing like 2 full-time jobs. Like it was way too much. And obviously like I said, I wrestled with like feeling like I needed to move on from the church job before I felt like that release. And that was because I was juggling so much. I was like, okay, Lord, when am I going to like go one way or the other? Like which way? Because I can't keep this up forever. Like I'm going to get older. This is going to be like too much. I'm going to have kids. It's going to be too much. And, you know, of course the Lord knew that. Like he knew just the right time for me to exit that church job, even though I wanted it to be much sooner than that.
Yeah, I hear you. Yeah. I remember, so my wife and I just moved with our kids. Obviously we brought them too. We just moved from Omaha to Asheville, North Carolina, which is about 4 hours from our whole family. And my wife never wanted to leave Charleston, where we're from. And I remember just wanting to get out so bad. I was like, I'm ready to be done. I've never lived anywhere else. I got to get out of this place. And so we finally had the opportunity. And when we left, I was like, I'm never going back. I'm never going back. And so we moved, and, we were gone for 7 years. And then all of a sudden I was like, I think I won't go back. And I was like, that can't be right. That can't be right. And so you're right. No. It is like, God was like, no, it's time. And it's time because you want to do it. You know what I mean? And so for me, it was like a big deal. And even my wife was like, why is this all of a sudden? And there were some things going on at the church that I was working at that were hard. And she's like, are you just trying to escape and use words that will get me to go with you? Yeah. And I was like, no, and we took a long time to process through that, but it was obvious at the end of it that God was in it. And even in the moments here, since we've gotten here, we're like, oh my gosh, this is exactly what we're supposed to be doing and exactly where we're supposed to be. But so a lot of that is good. If it's like if you have an adverse reaction to doing something for so long and then it's on your heart, that could be a good indicator that God is calling you to do that thing. So that's good. But you said,
and it was scary, so scary.
Yeah, I bet. Well, yeah, that was actually, I was going to ask that. I had two questions. I couldn't figure out which one to go with. So this one, when you made that actual like transition from doing both to doing just the freelance. Yeah. What were those feelings like? What was the fear level? Or do you still have that, that kind of stuff? Yes. Okay.
Yeah, sometimes. Totally. Like, because I feel like, right now, I feel like I have so many ideas. Like, I am I've become such a creative, and I didn't used to be, but I've become such a creative. And it's like, I have all these ideas like spiraling. It feels like they're just like, and I have a hard time sleeping at night sometimes because of it. But like some of them, I'm like, I'm so passionate about this, but I also am like, when am I going to do this? And like, I don't have time to do this. And when am I going to drop these other things off in order to like handle this? So sometimes I feel like I struggle with like really giving things to God and trusting his timing, because he gives me all these ideas. And sometimes, I don't know if you've ever experienced this, sometimes he gives you like an idea and it's like a not now idea, but he hasn't really told you when. And you're like, okay, that's a cool idea, but like when, Lord? Like when's that going to come? So like with the curriculum, I'm still writing that like full time, and it takes up a ton of my time. Yeah. But I've got all these other ideas of things that I really want to do, like books that I want to write and coaching I want to do and speaking I want to do. And I'm like, oh, I don't have time to do that right now because I'm doing this, curriculum writing full time. So that's been something that God's been really wrestling with me. Like I've been wrestling with God about like, when am I going to be done writing curriculum? Like, am I still going to keep doing this? And I feel like I'm starting to get some clarity on that, which is really cool. I've been writing forever. Like, and it gets kind of weary sometimes. I'm like, oh, am I supposed to still be doing this? Like, am I weary because I'm of my human side, or because like this is starting to become something I'm not supposed to be doing? So that's some things that I kind of wrestle with sometimes. Yeah.
No, I'm with you on that. I've got like a whole list of ideas that I'm going to do one day. I've got like 6 different book titles written down on a sticky note on my desk. All that kind of stuff is just like, when, God, when? And then I'll do something crazy, like all of these ideas I have, and then you just go do something completely different,
Yeah, totally. I'm totally like that. I'm like, I have 2 like book ideas that I'm like, I really want to do. I feel like they're so needed, and like I want to, but I'm like, okay, I just have to trust God to carve that time out. When it's the right time, it's gonna be the right time. Yeah. But it's like, it's definitely not right now.
Yeah, I know. I finished writing my first book and then started on my second one, and then I wrote a completely different one that I just put out recently. I'm like, okay, that's fine.
That sometimes just happens,
Yeah, for
it's
sure.
Like, oh, yeah.
For sure. The other thing that I was going to ask about was, you said that God told you you're going to write curriculum until he tells you to stop. And I think you kind of touched on that a little bit just now, but have you, obviously you're still doing it, so he hasn't told you to stop yet, but have there been moments where you're like, hey man, I think it's time?
Yeah. Oh yeah, totally. So like back last summer, and like even before that a little bit, I hadn't really been like, okay, I'm kind of like done. Like personally, I'm kind of done with this. Like I've been doing this so long. I don't know if you ever like do something so long that you're like, I have been doing this for so long. And like sometimes I really enjoy it, and sometimes it just really is so time consuming, and I want to do something new. And I think sorting that, like those feelings of like, is this just me wanting to do something new? Like I'm getting bored with this, or is it really time for me to move on to something new? And I feel like I was starting to get a little bit of clarity back in the fall. I felt like God specifically told me, be obedient with what I've given you. Keep doing what I've given you, which is like the writing the curriculum, and do it well, do it 100%. And this was something I talked about in a breakout back at the Kids Matter conference. I did a breakout called Thriving in the Waiting Season, because I really had felt like I'd been in a waiting season in, like, for me personally, like when am I going to do something new? When is this going to drop off? That type of thing. And I felt like God really convicted me and told me that I'd been doing what he'd been telling me to do. Like, I've been obedient, but not fully obedient, because I wasn't doing it well. And I wasn't doing it like with all my heart. Like, I was doing it half-heartedly. Like, basically like, okay, God, I'll just keep doing this. Like, but not really bringing my 100% to it. And I really felt like God just really kicked me in the pants and convicted me and said, hey, there is something else out there for you, but I want to see you be like fully obedient with what I've already given you, what's in your hand. And I was like, ooh, man, like, it was just one of those moments where it's just like just knock you off your feet, like, just such a download, like a God download. And I was like, okay, God, like, and that really helped me, I feel like, work harder and give my full, effort to what I've been doing. But I also feel like he's starting to like release me from it in the next, in a little while. Like, I've still got a full year left, like a full scope and sequence left that I've got to finish out. But I'm like definitely like praying through, like, am I going to release another scope and sequence? Like, I'm not sure. This is probably the first time I've felt like I'm not sure. So definitely still seeking God on that.
Yeah, I get you. I wanted to go to that breakout too, and I was really mad because I was teaching one at the same time, and I was like, I wonder if I could skip my own breakout.
It was such a good breakout, honestly. I was so nervous about it because it was a soul care like breakout. I never do soul care.
Yeah.
But God just like dropped that one on me, and I was so nervous to give that breakout because I knew I was going to cry during that breakout.
Oh, well, I did. So I just
vulnerable.
cry every time. I just cry every time I speak.
Me too.
And so that way, then, it's not, they don't know if it's really hitting me or if it's just the normal vibes.
You're a crier too?
Oh yeah, every time.
My goodness, me too.
I preached this weekend, and somebody, and I didn't. It was like a big. I walked off like, I kept it together the whole time. But then my lead pastor was like, yeah, somebody asked me this weekend, is he gonna cry every time? I was like, I wasn't crying. I had the nose hair thing. Oh, that was offline. I had this. I walked out to start. Thing. I forgot we talked about that before. I walked out to start preaching, and I had one like nose hair that was just like touching the end of my nose, and so the whole time I'm like sniffling and trying to fix it, and it was, anyway, that's a whole nother story for a whole nother day.
Even though you actually didn't cry.
Right. I guess because I was just sniffling the whole time, and it was second service too, so my voice was already shot for the day, and you know how it goes. But anyway.
I do. I honestly cry probably every time I speak too. So that makes me feel so much better. I love it when I meet someone who is like that. I'm like, I just am very emotional. Like, I get so into it, and I'm gone.
Yeah. People are like, why do you get so emotional about it? I was like, do you understand like the gravity of this? Like, do you get it? Like,
I am so emotional about it.
Do you believe
so passionate
what we're talking about? Because if so, like, man, the weight of that, that's why I get emotional about it. Anyway.
Me too.
What am I going to tell you? I don't know. So, okay, this is not exactly the direction I think we talked about going with this conversation, but I love it. That's why I do it like this. But
it's all good.
So you're a lot like me in that, like, there's a lot of ideas going on,
so many.
All the time. I've got like this long list of goals and things I want to do, and we've talked about it. But I think at the end of the day, it's not about the ideas all going every which way, but how do we package them and bring them together in a way that gives us sort of purpose and direction and meaning for our life, and allows us to honor who God's called us to be. So how have you managed to do that in the midst of all these ideas and all these opportunities and all these different things that you could be doing? How do you focus it on who God's called Corinne to be?
I think it has been hard for me at times. Like, I feel like I had kind of lost that a little bit for during that waiting season. I feel like I kind of lost myself a little bit, lost like really my purpose. Like, I was just kind of on autopilot, like, okay, I'm doing the things, but like not really into it, not feeling passionate about it anymore, just not feeling like that purpose. And I think, that's why I had to get that God moment where God was like, no, you like just doing something is not enough. It's the way that you're doing it. It's why you're doing it. It's the purpose behind it. Like you're saying, if I've called you to do it, like you should be giving 100%. You should be passionate about it. This is your purpose. And, it can be so hard to sort that, like what is something that I want to do and what's something that God really wants me to do. And sometimes those things do not align, right?
Yeah.
And my word for the year this year, actually, I've gotten a word for the year every year for the past, like, I'd say 5 years. I started like just in like November, December of the year before, I started seeking God and just saying, God, give me a word. Like, I know some people like choose their word. I just always ask God to just give me a word, because I don't want it to be about me, because I make things about me really easily, because I'm a control freak. Like I'm like a perfectionist. I'm a 1 on the Enneagram. So if I'm in control of it, like I'm going to do whatever I want. Right.
Yeah.
So I have really tried to release that to God every year. And for the last 5 years, without fail, I pray about it and I feel like he drops it like immediately for me. And it was a really weird one this past year, and it was alignment. So this year, my word is alignment. And I was like, wow, alignment. So that's so good. And he's been really speaking to me about, just aligning my thoughts and aligning my words and my actions with him, right? With his thoughts, his words, his actions. And I feel like that's such a good word for me, because again, like I want to, like, I've got all these ideas, but I keep going back to that prayer. Like, God, these are my ideas, but are they your ideas? I want to be aligned with your ideas, your thoughts, your words. So that's kind of been like the prayer I just keep going back to. I know it's only February. It feels like it's been a really long year already.
Yes,
for
it
me.
has.
And
yes,
every time I get an idea and I get in my head about it, or I can't sleep at night, I'm trying to go back to that prayer. God, is this what you want? Is this in alignment with you? And so that's been really cool. It's a good word for me. God's been using, like, my kids are super into trains right now. I have a 1.5-year-old and a 4-year-old. They're both boys. And they got a bunch of Thomas train sets for Christmas.
Let's go.
And it's been nothing but trains since December, like literally train tracks all over my house and trains all over my house. But like alignment, right? My word being alignment, and then all the trains and the tracks. And I'm like, oh my goodness. It's like, what a God thing, right? For him to use like my 4-year-old's toys to like speak to me. Look, I'm going to cry. Here it is. Using my kids' toys to like speak to me and give me words that, align with that word, alignment.
Yeah.
So anyway, very cool.
Yeah, that's good. This morning, like literally just this morning, I was reading in my reading plan, and I came across that Psalm, and David's like, when we delight ourselves in him, he'll give us the desires of our hearts. And I think that that's like such a key idea. For me, I cling so tightly to that. He will give me the desires of my heart, right? And I'm like, yeah, God, you're going to do it. You're going to give me what I want. And he's like, don't forget that first bit. And I'm like, no, we don't want to talk about that. Like, just, you said you were going to give me the desires of my heart. And he's like, it's a conditional clause here. And, delight in him. And because that changes our heart and puts us in alignment with him. And then, we do get the desires of our heart because our desires are in alignment with his will. And so it's so hard it's simple, but it's not easy, right? To live that out.
No, it's so simple to say. I feel like the older I get, like the harder it is for me to like sometimes like release that control, because I can operate so much in my own brain and my own humanity, like, and my own abilities. And it's like, ooh, wait. Have I invited God into this? Have I talked to him about this? Have I aligned with him? Right? Like, and I'm like, ooh, did I just say yes to something and like didn't even think about talking to God about it? So, oh goodness. So I feel like that happens more for me with age.
Yeah. It's like when Joshua made that deal with the foreigners because he didn't pray first, and all of a sudden you're in a situation that you never would have been in if you sought God. I had a guy that used to work with me, and he would always remind me, he would come in like, hey, don't forget we should pray before we plan. And I'm like, you just need to live in my office all the time. Because every time I'm like, here's a problem. All right, here's what we're going to do. And God's like, you're working way too hard. But
that is so true. Oh, yeah.
I know for a while, and we talked about this a little bit, in your own journey, you've kind of felt like out of alignment with with who God's called you to be, even within what you're doing, like within
Yes.
your business and all that kind of stuff.
For sure.
There's a timeline, right? Like a story arc of the KidMinCorinne
It's crazy.
brand. How did you lose that, and how did you get it back?
I really do. It's hard to go back and be like, was it wrong? Like, I don't know if it was wrong. It may have been right for that season. I'm really not sure. But, I kind of originally came out with like my blog and everything, and it was KidMinCorinne. It was KidMinCorinne.com. And KidMinCorinne was like this silly name that like one of my friends in college, I actually went to college to be a children's ministry major. And I had a friend in college who was like, oh, like I had Twitter back then. He was like, you should be KidMinCorinne on Twitter. And I was like, oh, KidMinCorinne, that sounds good. Like, so, when I came out with my blog, I was like, okay, KidMinCorinne, KidMinCorinne.com. So yeah, I was KidMinCorinne. And I was for a few years. I can't even remember how long, like a while. And then I just came up with this great idea to rebrand to KMC Ministries and KMC Curriculum. And I really feel like the heart behind that was maybe in the wrong place, to be honest. Like I feel like I wanted to like distance myself from the brand and make the brand less about me and less personal and more, almost like more corporate, more like professional. People will take it more seriously if they don't think it's like just about me. And I think also it played into some of my insecurities about like myself as a leader. Like, well, maybe people will like this company and they'll buy stuff from me and they'll listen to this if they don't think it's me, right? And I think I kind of hid behind it, to be honest, and felt like that was the right thing. And honestly, it really didn't pan out that well, if we're being honest. Like I didn't sell more, I didn't do better. Like again, I'm not sure if it was wrong, but I can tell you like a lot of the heart behind it, I think maybe was like misplaced and in the wrong place. And just recently, again, it's like there was just such a pivotal point for me back last year in like the summer, the fall, where I just really like God dropped that bomb on me, and I really had a fire just lit underneath my rear end, and just a lot of stuff started to shift for me. And I had a conversation with someone who's actually doing my website right now, and he was like, no, like you should own your brand. Like I think you should be KidMinCorinne. I think because I was like, I'm kind of thinking about going back to KidMinCorinne. Like, I don't know. Like, I feel like the KMC thing, like, it just didn't really work out. Like, I'm kind of thinking about going back to owning it. And he was like, no, like, you really should. Like, you are your brand, and you should own it, and you should be personal and capitalize on that, And I'm like, oh, but like, what if people like don't like that or think that I'm like, full of myself because, I'm the face of my brand and it's KidMinCorinne and, all these thoughts, but then after we had that conversation, it just kept kind of like playing in my head, like one of those things where it was like, it just kept coming back, like, yeah, this is what I'm supposed to do. And then I had a conversation with my mom, and she was like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that all makes sense. I prayed about it, and I was like, yeah, let's do it. So yeah, then I like, I did the rebrand, and my website is still it's still getting rebranded. So my website is still all like KMC Ministries, KMC Curriculum, but I did like my social media and everything has transitioned back over. And it's been so good, like just owning my brand, being honest, it's me, and I'm the one who writes the curriculum, and I'm the one who is running this ministry, and just sharing my passion and my heart. And I think just personalizing it has been so good. Like the growth has been amazing. And it isn't about me, even though like, my name is on it. It's like, it's not about me. It's about the passion that God's given me and the ideas that God's given me, and just sharing that with the kids ministry community. And it just makes it different when it's like a real person, right? It's that personal touch.
Yeah.
It's been so natural, and it's been so good to make that shift. And that's how I know it was, it was just the right thing. It was the God thing to do.
Yeah. Yeah. I saw that post when you put that post on social media, on Instagram. I think I saw it first. I was excited for you. Like I saw it and I was like, yes, okay, own this thing. And I think it was that day or a couple of days later where I reached out and was like, hey, we should talk about this on my podcast, because I feel like it's what we're here. Like, this is what I'm trying to figure out, right? Like, how do we find this purpose, and how do we really get comfortable with our identity? Wow, what did happen? How we get comfortable with our identity, and just knowing who we are. And so for me, I saw that and I was like, this is exciting stuff. This is going to be great. And so I'm excited for you as you continue to move forward in that, and keep owning who you are. And there's a lot of people out that see your stuff, that see your social media, that see, that things like that are asking the question of like, do I have what it takes? Do I, can I do something like this? And to see you step out from behind sort of a, as you said, maybe whether it's a mask or a costume or hiding behind whatever, to see you step out from behind that is going to put, give confidence to other people. So I think that's awesome. How would you communicate that, I guess, like if you were sitting in front of somebody who was, especially, as we think about like next gen kids ministry, students, things like that, the younger ones coming up behind us, how would you encourage somebody to not hide behind a false identity, but really kind of pursue who God's called them to be?
Yeah, I think, some of it is just like, again, it's back to like seeking God, right? Seeking God before you do anything, and then knowing that it's God's idea, right? Like we're just putting it all on him. Like we all try to like, I think, hold everything ourselves, and we put it on like this burden, right? Like we're like, oh, I'm just going to wear this as a backpack. I'm just going to keep loading it up. And, we take all this weight on ourselves when we don't need to. When we bring it to God, like we were saying, always bringing it to him, and then knowing this is a God idea. This is not a me idea, which means it's going to be right. And if some people don't like it, that doesn't make it wrong that you're doing it. If people like criticize you or whatever, again, it doesn't mean that you're doing the wrong thing. You have to be confident that you're doing what God's called you to do. And you have to be confident that your heart's in the right place and that the purpose behind it is the right thing. And then you can't worry about what other people think, because there will always be people who think what you're doing is wrong, but they're not the ones that you're held accountable to. God is.
Right. Yeah, I remember the other day I got like one of my first mean comments on a YouTube short, and I was kind of like, all right, finally I'm doing something. I'm saying things that are that matter, there's weight behind because someone's upset, and I'm not trying to, I'm not out there trying to hurt people's feelings or make people mad. In fact, the thing that was commented on was actually pretty silly, but at the end of the day, like if we're saying things that matter, then someone's going to be upset. And so I don't know, it's good to,
it's a fact. I mean, if you're getting any kind of attention, if you're saying anything, like you said, of weight, there's going to be someone who disagrees with you. So that's why it's all the more important that before you put yourself out there and you do those things, that you're certain that your heart is in the right place. Because then you can stand firm and you can say, this is what I'm supposed to be doing, and I'm going to walk it out regardless of what anyone says.
That's awesome. That's so good. The last thing is this here, and this is kind of a rant maybe for myself. Like I know all these people that have these great nicknames like KidMinCorinne and all that kind of stuff, and I've never had a good nickname, and it's not fair. And that's, you know what I'm saying? Like my name doesn't rhyme with anything in ministry, and so it's just kind of sad. So if anybody out there hold on, has a good nickname for me.
It depends on how you're saying it. It depends on how you're saying it, right? Okay, so like you're doing the next
how I'm saying my name,
right?
Like how I'm saying my name?
No, work.
There's only one way.
Work with me.
Yeah, okay.
No, work with me.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So you're doing like next gen, right?
Yeah. So I'm a next gen pastor. Stuff? Yeah, but
okay. So listen to me. Hear me out.
Oh my gosh.
What about next gen Brandon?
See, I knew you were going to say that, and it's close. I get it's close, but the best thing I came up with was just calling myself the next gen pastor on Instagram, but.
No, I like that. I think that's cool. Yeah. I think it's cool.
I need to lean into that a little bit.
I like next gen Brandon.
Yeah.
I feel like it depends on how you say it.
Yeah, fair enough. Anywho. Well, hey, anything that you would add, like as we're thinking about purpose and we're thinking about identity and all the things that we've talked about, you're good at this. We've just talked about how we have all these different ideas and you've managed to funnel them down. So any kind of like final words of wisdom or thoughts?
That I haven't already said. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't think so. It's Friday afternoon when we're recording this, so
that's fair.
That's a lot. That's a lot to expect out of my brain. I think it just all goes back to God, right? I mean, that's like the easy answer, but it's like the true answer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
That's where identity and our purpose is found. Spending time in His Word, like that's something I'll share that. I've been working on some habits. I've got this habit checklist that I've created, and I have 5 daily habits that I've been working on. And so I have this checklist that I literally have to check each day if I do these habits. And then I make myself put an X on it if I don't do it.
Ooh.
And one of those things, I know, and the X's hurt because I'm, again, a perfectionist.
I bet, yeah.
So this works really well for my personality.
And like kids ministry too, like you've had this whole, I mean, you've been conditioned to love checks and hate X's.
The checks and X's are really holding me accountable. And one of the things that's on there is like just my Bible reading plan that I'm doing and my time with God. And so I'm holding myself accountable that way because I want to make sure that I am in God's word every day, because the more that I'm in it, the more I hear him speaking to me. And that's just true. And when I allow myself to get too busy and not make time for that, that's when I hear his voice so much less. So it's a basic, obviously, but man, spending time in the word, always making time for that so that you can hear God's voice, so that you do know that your purpose and identity are found in him.
Yeah, absolutely. The basics are basics for a reason, you know, it's because they work.
Right.
So it's like the fundamentals, you know, any coach that harps on fundamentals, they're fundamentals for a reason. So anyway, well, hey, I really appreciate you being on the show today. Looking forward to next time, but thanks again.
Yeah.
It's been awesome.
Thanks for having me.
What an incredible conversation with Corinne. I really enjoyed hanging out with her. I really enjoyed just, I don't know, I feel like I relate in so many different areas and so many different ways to some of the stuff that she shared, especially as she was talking about having all these ideas. You know, as we're pursuing our purpose, a lot of times, or trying to figure out our identity or who God's called us to be, it can be easy to get just inundated with ideas. You know, there's two kind of big problems when we face what is my purpose or who has God called me to be. One is just this idea bankruptcy. We have no idea. We have nothing on the vision board, if you will. We've no thoughts about what is our purpose or what is our identity. And then there's the opposite problem where we have so many things that we could do. You know, there's a lot of things that I love doing, and there's a lot of things that I could see myself doing long term. You know, I used to manage Starbucks, and I loved it. I loved managing the Starbucks, and I was good at it. It was great. It was something that I could have done long term if I wanted to. I love music. I love playing guitar. I love singing, and I love songwriting, and I love leading worship. And those are all things that I've had opportunities to pursue and could see myself doing. I love writing. I'm an author. I love writing books. I love writing blog posts and things like that. And that's something I could see myself really leaning into and doing full time. But at some point, I realized that what God was really calling me to do and what God was calling me to pursue with everything was ministry, was being a pastor, was pouring into the next generation, was affecting the lives of kids and students and leading them toward Jesus. That is what God has called me to do and purposed me to do uniquely. Now, all these other things, as you can see, will still be a part of my life. You know, I'll still have the opportunity to write. I'll still have the opportunity to play some music, and I still have the opportunity to make coffee from time to time because I bought myself an espresso machine. And so, you know what? There's plenty of things in our life that we're going to enjoy doing and can be part of our purpose, but aren't our central purpose. In my book, I kind of talk about it this way, as we have these two different characteristics or two different variables to think about when we're pursuing our purpose. One is, what do we love doing? What are the things that we love doing that give us energy, that we have fun? When we show up to do these things, we think thoughts like, man, I can't believe I get to do this right now. What are the things that we love doing? And then on the other side, the other variable is, what are the things that we're actually good at? Where do we see results? Where do we see positive forward movement? Because here's the deal. I love playing football, the actual game, American football. I love it. I love throwing the ball. I love running and catching the ball from time to time. Don't get crazy. I love the game, but I'm not that good at it. You know, I'm good enough to play pickup ball in the backyard somewhere. I'm good enough to maybe even play flag football with some people my same age, but I have no shot. I have no shot at making it to the NFL. So if I was to pursue the game of football as my purpose, it would leave me feeling defeated. It would leave me feeling inadequate. It would leave me feeling like a failure because I'm not that good at it. You know, and on the other side, there's some things that I'm really, really good at that I don't like doing. and I can't think of any right now because I've trauma blocked them all because I hate them so much, but there's things that you're going to be good at, naturally gifted, that you're not going to love. And you can pursue that as your purpose. And you're going to see some success, and people are going to celebrate it. And people are going to say, you're so awesome at this. You were made for this. But inside, you're going to be dying. You're going to hate it. You're going to feel burnt out. You're going to feel overwhelmed, and you're going to be stuck in a pattern of performance instead of joy. We need both. We need both. If you're pursuing your purpose, you've got to find something that you're both good at and that you love. And when those two things come together, when you find something that you're great at, that you're killing it, you're seeing results, and that you love it, like you're having a blast, you would do it no matter what. When you find the intersection of those two things, that is where you're going to begin to find your purpose. That is where you're going to begin to find who God has crafted you uniquely to be. And I think that as we talked to Corinne, that's what she was talking about. Like, she did love this part of kids ministry. She was even good at it, but she found the intersection of the two when she got to do her own business, when she got to start her company, when she got to really start building the KidMinCorinne company to support other churches and support other ministries. She found that intersection. What are you good at? What do you love? In the intersection of those two things, you will begin to find your purpose. You got to bring it all together. And again, as we're talking about bringing it all together, you got to bring it into alignment with what God says about you. In the Psalms, David said, when we delight in him, when we delight ourselves in God, he will give us the desires of our heart, because our heart is going to change. Our heart is going to be in alignment with who God is and what he's called us to do. When we delight in him, when we find ourselves, when we find our identity in him, and we allow him to speak to our desires and allow him to speak to our hearts and tell us what he has for us and tell us what he's got planned for us and really pour into us who we are because of who he is, then we are going to find the desires of our hearts. We are going to find purpose. We are going to find passion. We're going to be doing those things that we're great at and that we love. And that's where it all comes from. Our purpose is not created. Our purpose is not invented. Our identities are not built. Our identities are not created. Our purpose and our identities are discovered. They're discovered. They're written on our hearts. They've been there from the beginning. They are deep within us. They already exist. We don't have to go out there and craft it, because we've been created by a creator for a purpose, and he has that purpose for us. He has written it on your heart. So stop trying to design your identity and your purpose and allow him to tell you what it is. Allow him to speak it to you. Allow him to give you that guidance in that direction. One of the earlier things in the conversation that she said was, God told me I was going to do this until he told me to stop. And in my own life, I've been up against that a few times where I've felt like it's time to be done with this. It's time to move on. It's time for me to experience something else. And God has said, not yet. God has told me to wait. And those seasons have been incredibly hard. Those seasons have been seasons that have caused me a great deal of impatience, a great deal of discontent, and a great deal of wandering. And yet, as I look back, he was with me in it. He was with me in all of it. And just telling me to just slow down. I've got something for you. I've got something great for you. In fact, as I was in the process of transitioning from Omaha back to this part of the country, back to the Southeast, there were two times when I thought, this is it. This is it. This is the thing. And both times God was like, this is not the thing. This is not it. And my heart was so broken in those moments. I was so sad when both of those opportunities passed me by. And I began to question if I was getting too impatient. I began to question if God was really in it. I began to question am I just trying to get out of a season, or is God really drawing me forward? And I knew that he was drawing me this way because I had never wanted to be here. You know, as I said, I never really wanted to come back to this part of the country. I didn't think I'd ever move back to the East. But I had this deep desire for some reason. I didn't know why. And then when these two opportunities kind of came and went, I was like, maybe I missed it. Maybe the goal here is just for me to be sad and long for home and then figure out how to get back into it. But then it all changed when I got called here, when I got this opportunity where I'm at now. And over the last couple of months, I have never been so certain of anything in my life. I've never been so confident that I am in exactly where God wants me to be. I've never been so convinced that God's hand was in all of it. And there have been seasons, don't get me wrong, there have been seasons where I'm like, this is a God thing, this is a God thing, and they were. But this time has been so clear that this was the right decision. And I could have missed it if I tried to rush, if I tried to get ahead of God, if I tried to get ahead of his presence. So wait on him. Wait for him to send you. Don't ask him to follow you where you're going. Ask him to send you where he is. And when we do that, we're going to land right in the middle of the purpose that he has called for us. Hey, I want to thank everyone for listening to this episode of This Awesome Life. We're a collection of stories that point to purpose. If you want to connect with Corinne, and I totally encourage you to do so, check the show notes. All of her links are down there for her website or social media. Her reels are incredible. You should watch them. They are so funny. She does a great job with that. If you want to connect with her, again, those... So if you want to connect with her, check the show notes, follow her on social media. You'll be glad you did. So if you want to connect with her, check the show notes, follow her on social media. You'll be glad you did. Also in the show notes, you'll find all the ways to get connected with me and further into... So if you want to connect with her, check the show notes, follow her on social media. You'll be totally glad you did. Also down in the show notes, you'll find all the ways to get further connected with This Awesome Life. Down there is links to my blog, my social media as well. You can also find my books down in the bottom in the show notes, and I would love for you to check those out. If you love this episode and you love the show in general, we would love for you to give us a 5-star review. Whenever you do that, it helps us get into the algorithms and in front of people who are searching for purpose. We'd love for you to help us out in that way. If you're listening on iTunes, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts or any other... If you're listening on one of the audio platforms out there, don't forget, we also have a YouTube channel where you can watch these interviews and see all of the funny faces that I make while I'm trying to listen and take notes at the same time. Highly recommend you check that out. It's also in the show notes. If you're watching this on YouTube, this has already gotten awkward and we're going to move along. So hey, like I said, thanks for listening or watching This Awesome Life. We'll see you next time.